Had my broker hat on, almost exclusively kind of broker hat on. And last year we spent a ton of time on compliance, bringing us. What did we talk about all last year at this time? Things were changing. What was happening? NAR was going to change the rules. No longer was the seller going to be paying at this time. We didn't know what was happening. We knew something was happening. We knew we had to figure it out. And that all worked out. Everyone's doing okay with that? Remember, the rule is, I'll just address some of the questions that we have around that still, but the rule is you have to have an agreement before you can start to work with someone, and that agreement has to talk about compensation. So you can do it as a showing. You can do a touring agreement, which is on the MLS. Touring agreement is provided by the MLS. This might be for someone who says, I'm not going to agree to pay or whatever. But in order to show a home, you have to have one. What's the first thing you have to have? Agency disclosure. And now you also, before you can show a home, you have to have an agreement, whether it be a touring agreement, a non-exclusive buyer rep, an exclusive rep, facilitator, some kind of agreement has to be in writing before you can show that house. If you have an exclusive rep agreement, on there you're talking about, and in everyone, you're talking about your compensation. Right? And the rule on the exclusive rep that we got to make sure that is happening as we're coming through compliance is you're not getting more than was agreed upon on your representation agreement. So I've gotten calls, well, can I take less? Do I have to make an amendment? You can make an amendment to everything's in line, but you're not legally obligated to change it if you're going to take less, right? However, you are still obligated to have the compensation disclosure. Compensation disclosure is supposed to go to your client as you're presenting the offer to the other side. So people have said, well, if we now have these buyer reps, which we've always had, why do I also need to have a compensation disclosure? The buyer rep talks about you and your client are in agreement of you owe me this. The compensation disclosure says, this is how that's getting to me, right? So that might come from the other side of the party. It might come from that person directly, whatever. We can figure all that out, but it has to be disclosed how that's working. One of the things that you want to make sure is that you're putting our BAC on the agreement. There's a compensation spot on the buyer rep, but you have to write the extra BAC cost, or you cannot collect more than's on that agreement. So if you only have your 2.7, you are not going to be able to collect from them the $4.99 broker admin fee we have here. However, Heather and Lydia are going to collect it from you within our agreed policy on that, right? There are times we don't collect it, as stated in the policy, few and far, whatever. Any questions about that? That's like old news, but we're still getting questions on that. No? Everyone doing this? We're good? Good. Go ahead.
Yeah, if you don't know the
right.
Broker account up front, just putting what you're asking for and then changing it.
Right. Yeah, that's the best way to do it, because what you want to do, the reason you want to submit it to your client as you're submitting the offer is so that they know, hey, this offer, or we got to ask for it on the purchase agreement, or I'm already being compensated from here, or you're going to be due this at closing, right? They need to know that as they're presenting the offer. Oftentimes, what we see is people don't have the compensation disclosure. Brady says, hey, or Lydia says, hey, to Brady usually, and then you go, well, this is ridiculous. Why do I need it now? Do I really have to go back to my client? And the answer is, yep, we need to have this for compliance. So just do it earlier on in the transaction. Your value, you already had the conversation with them about how you're getting paid. Now you're just disclosing to them, this is how that's being paid to me in this transaction, right? So if If you're charging 3% to your buyer and the seller is offering 2%, or the selling agent is offering 2%, then what do? What are some of your options? What's that? Yeah, how would you negotiate that? What would you do?
Buyer pays the 1%, or you ask the seller for sessions.
Right, so you can do it a couple ways, right? Is you call the listing agent, are you offering commission? Yes, we're offering 2%. Great, I've already had the conversation with my client that you owe me 3%. The conversation can be simply as, hey, we talked about it's 3% to work with me. They're offering 2%. Would you like to put that on the purchase agreement so you don't have to bring the additional money to closing? Sure. Yeah, just like everything on the purchase agreement, it is a negotiated term. One of the things I would, when I have that call, is I express to the listing agent, hey, I'm sure you could explain this to your sellers that my clients, as you're negotiating, don't want to bring additional money to closing. This is why that piece we don't want to negotiate. They're under contract for that with me. We don't want to negotiate that piece there. It is negotiable in everything, right? Same like purchase price. Here's why we're offering this. I understand you want this. This is why we're offering this. Negotiating like that. So it's not set ever, but help them understand that. Or if the sellers are going to bring your additional cost to closing, the buyer, yep, your buyer, sorry, thanks, Heather. If your buyers are going to bring additional cost to closing, what do you think is an important step to include? Or who do you think needs to know that? Title needs to know that. It needs to be on the spot. I know not everyone's sending all your forms, oftentimes it's whatever, but they have to see that difference, and so does the lender. The lender, if they qualified for so much and now all of a sudden they have to bring additional money, the lender might go, wait a minute, they don't have this additional money. How is that going to happen? If you screw up and somehow that hasn't happened, which is happening in our market center, there is a way that client can write a direct check to the brokerage, and you'll still get your compensated. Don't screw that up. Because I was tempted to say, oh, sorry for your loss, but don't screw that up. Make sure they know and everything's there. Any questions about that piece? Go ahead, Heather.
What happens if you say you have it signed that the buyer's gonna pay you 3%? And then the house that you're showing is offered at 2.7 and you're like, oh, okay, can I just accept the 2.7?
What? Yes. The answer to that is yes.
Then you have to change the form?
So you don't have to change your purchase agreement, or not your purchase agreement, but your buyer representation. You don't have to amend that. Why don't you have to amend that? Because you're getting less. You don't have to amend it, but what does that need to show on? Compensation disclosure. Here's why.
2.7?
Yep, that you're taking 2.7. Here's why I think you should also amend it there, is because you want your documents to be in agreement, right? So I think, well, if you're sending a compensation agreement to take 2.7, just send an amendment that says, hey, I'm taking to take 2.7 to the buyer rep. Make sense? Make sense? Make sense? Make sense? Good. All right, another one, another piece of compliance, but this isn't really compliance realtor, this is compliance business, which our next two pieces are, is I got an email. If I say BOI, do you know what I'm talking about?
Say what?
OI?
BOI?
Sounds bad.
Sounds bad. But it's let's see, I gotta open my email here.
It's from me, insurance?
This is you, and it reminded me of this. I should have spoken on this earlier.
Got it.
So thanks for bringing that up. What this was is the government was collecting information on who owns businesses, and they wanted to collect yours. And as LLCs, we were supposed to provide basic information to them to be in compliance with that. However, and that was coming due, right? So that's why you might have seen it in different places. It was coming due. However, a appeals court said, no, that's not information that you're entitled to. So if you got a BOI request, which is beneficial ownership information, and you haven't submitted, if you've submitted it already, whatever, you're not harmed. If you haven't submitted it, don't worry about it. It's not something you have to do as a business owner. They said, no good. Good? Go ahead.
Any idea what they were gonna do with the information?
Oh,
And it's standard IRS stuff that they probably have anyway.
they were trying to put together, it was more for LLCs that didn't have they were trying to figure out who owned all the LLCs. If it was like one of mine is Barber Home Team or Barber, whatever our rentals one is, it was Barber Home Team and then it was Andy Barber. It was very obvious who it was, but then when you have all these out there that don't have, like, it's just a group or it's a whatever, they're
Sure.
trying to connect some dots on the back end, and we're trying to do this to make it easier.
Right. It's gathering more and more, especially when something's owned by multiple parties with investor groups and different things. So there's stuff on Minnesota Realtors. You guys have access to that as Realtors. You just paid your dues. Way to go on it, everyone. So there's information there if you want to dig deeper, if you want to find out more and more about that. That's one of them. Also, you guys, you have access to National Association of Realtors. There's more and more pieces of information there that you can explore and look at and see. And then, of course, there is there's one more that I didn't pull up, and that is Minneapolis Area Association of Realtors. And there's more and more information there. How many of you guys ever go to those sites?
Well, they're to pay my dues.
Isn't that great? It's the only time I have to use this website. It's like it's like Command a little bit. The only time I use Command is when I need to get paid. Well,
I mean, flyers in Command.
there you go. See, you at least got the next level. It's a tool here that if we don't interact with it and we're just paying for it, it's no fun. Command can do a lot of things, but if we're only using it because we're getting paid, that's not a lot of fun. So yeah, so all of these things are available to you as well. When you guys ask me a question, I'd say, hey, I just need a couple minutes to get back up to you on that. Oftentimes what I'll do is I'll come to my Minnesota area, oops, that's Minneapolis, my Minnesota Realtors, and I can go to this legal tab and start looking at, hey, has a question been asked before? And then also if I say, hey, I just want to run it by an attorney, especially if it's a contract piece or a question of what's for and whatever, then as brokers, we have access to Minnesota Realtors attorney, and they kind of can give us some guidance on some of that kind of stuff. Then if it gets a little deeper, then I call our attorney and have that conversation there. Make sense? Yeah. All right. Today, what we're going to talk about, the rules are changing on TCPA. You guys know what TCPA is? TCPA. I created a little slideshow that I'm not a huge slideshow guy, but let's go to our TCPA. How many of you are still doing, whether it's from your database or from your from a dialer, from whatever, how many of you guys are doing prospecting, actively reaching out to other people? Okay, how many of you say the majority of the way you do that is by phone? Okay, how many say the majority of the way you do that is by text? Okay, text or phone. And how many say email or mail or some other form of kind of communication? Gotcha. Perfect. So what is a TCPA? This is the thing that if you go to Keller stuff, every time now we say in a TCPA compliant way, if you went to bold, bold is highly on, highly prospecting based. Bold is for the lead gen activity. And, we always say in a TCPA friendly manner. One of the reasons is because Keller Williams, actually Gary Keller paid a big lawsuit in, for TCPA, on behalf of his agent. He said he's gonna do it once and he's not gonna do it again. And we are saying as a brokerage, we're gonna communicate what you can and cannot do. And then you're gonna be responsible for following, these rules, right? Because they're getting more and more attention to be compliant in the TCPA compliant, which is supposed to be protecting us. We all get the annoying phone calls. Sometimes they show right up as spam on our, or like on some of our things. Sometimes they especially political season. I don't know how they were able to do it because it didn't feel very TCPA compliant. But I'd get a text like every 3 hours or something from. Sometimes I was the best conservative Republican. Other times I was the most liberal. Hey, we want you, and just both sides were sending things. It didn't even matter what side. So the TCPA is a Telephone Consumer Protection Act. It's a federal law enacted to regulate telemarketing calls, auto dialers, pre-recorded calls, text messages, and unsolicited solicited faxes. It aims to protect consumers from unwanted communications and excessive robocalls. How many of you are using a dialer? Anyone using a dialer? Okay. How many of you are using pre-populated call list? Anyone using pre-populated call list? Okay. How many of you are calling for sale by owners or expireds? Okay. How many of you are sending blanketing text or mass text, maybe we'll call them, or phone calls to your database? Anyone doing that? No? Wow, we're just not as prospective as we were at one time. I want to say it affects all of those, especially the biggest change this year is going to be something called one-to-one communication, and you have to have one-to-one permission. And so we'll talk more about that. TCPA is changing to close the lead generator loophole and combat excessive. Oh, I forgot to say, how many of you are paying for leads? Anyone paying for a lead?
Like from Zillow or
Like
something?
Zillow or homes.com or the random people that call you and say, hey, we got a lead for you. Anyone else get those calls?
No.
Or text, we got a lead for you. Do you ever respond to those?
No.
No. Okay, it applies to those too.
Pretend someone did.
But yeah, so it applies to all those.
Wow, we still talking about it?
Yeah, all those.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, if you use a phone as a business, either through this or texting or a dialer or even just reaching out to your database, well, you need to know what's happening with the TCPA in that way. These charges, oh yeah, so a lead generator loophole to combat excessive robocalls and texts. These changes include a $500 per violation. The challenge isn't the one thing that's expensive. The problem is if you are using a dialer and are skipping the do not call, every call you make that person's on a do not call would be a $500 charge. So it's not the one person that is going to complain that you called them 2 times and you're going to pay $1,000 or $500. It's going to be you use the dialer, you called all these people on the do not call list, and that's what the problem is. Violation of statute of limitations for 4 years. TCPA laws are up. Oh, lawsuits. This is the part of the deal. TCPA lawsuits are up 40% already in 2024. Highlighting the increased enforcement of these regulations. TCPA is not a real estate thing. It's a everyone thing. Realtors are a big part of what's happening that the focus is on. Good? Questions about this at all? Go ahead.
The term combat excessive, does that just mean aggressive?
Yeah, where it says combat excessive robocalls and texts. That's like, I'll just be this guy, okay? I'll admit to some of my faults in the past. I would call someone. I didn't get them right in the morning. And by the way, my business was great. I didn't get them right in the morning. I would call 2 hours later. Hey, I missed your call. I would then call again as I wrapped up my lead generation at the end, and I'd say, hey, I didn't get your call today. Why don't you give me a call back and I'll reach out tomorrow. That's probably excessive, right? If I'm reaching, calling, sometimes I leave a message, sometimes I don't leave a message. That's probably excessive. One of the things that we're going to see on here is one of the things that gets you in trouble is if you don't say who you are on your caller ID. I know some lead gen things let you put whatever you want in your caller ID. We are supposed to say, hey, Kevin Campbell, Realtor Keller Williams, right? That's who I am. Oftentimes what we do is not put that because we figure if they see who it is, they're not going to pick up, right? That's one of the challenges. So excessive or robocalls and texts, that's what it is. It's like, come on, leave me alone. I'm not wanting for these
And
things.
this $500 that you're talking about right now is just phone calls.
Oh, we'll get to that.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, so it's for a violation of the TCPA. TCPA is getting weird because it was phone calls. Communication has changed since phone calls were first there. So what's the new federal TCPA laws? Well, one, the Consumer Protection Act is a federal law, and this is what it is: enacted to regulate telemarketing calls. Okay, that's one thing. Auto dial calls, pre-recorded calls. Have you guys ever used a dialer where you left like a pre-recorded voicemail? You now have 3 people up there on a time. You have one that says, hello? Hello? Oh, I can't, I'll call you back, right? Did you ever do this? Was this just me and my, right? Because you might have 2 people on the phone at a time. This is combating some of those things that we have done in the past. Pre-recorded calls, text messages. So this is where now it's not just this, it's our text messages. I love my Mac because it syncs right with my phone, so I can do my texting right on my Mac. So I'll say negative things about things that I needed to change and I don't do anymore. But I would go flyer a neighborhood, right? Then I'd go to my dialer and I'd say, tell me all the numbers that were in there. And then I would take a text and I would write my text. Hey, I dropped by, you weren't at your door, I left the thing, let me know what you think. Send, hey, and then I would copy and paste that time after time to everyone in the neighborhood so that that might violate the TCPA. These are the things that we don't want to do that could get us in trouble. They're creative, but not great for the consumer. And unsolicited faxes. I think that's funny. I don't know who's still faxing unsolicited faxes.
Can you group fax anybody? Cause I'm like, that takes a really long time.
Well, I don't know. I think it's funny that it's still on our contract, and because on our contracts, we have permission to communicate with you, right? Which we'll talk a little bit about. And I circle it all the time as my little, you just agreed to pay me thousands of dollars, and now you're also communicating that I can send you fax. This aims to protect consumers, always consumers. That's why laws are here. This is what it's about. It's not about protecting realtors, it's about protecting consumers from unwanted communications and excessive robocalls. So 2024, although in real estate, we were figuring out how do we move forward? Will buyers agents still be real? What are we doing? We're all worried about that. By the way, can I just tell you? I heard it 2 places this week. 92% of the things that we worry about never come to fruition. 92% of the things that we worry about never come to fruition. Just think about that as you're stressing making that call to your client, or thinking about, you delay it. How am I gonna have this conversation? How never 92% of the things that we worry about don't come to fruition. So in March, what happened is text messages are now included in the federal TCPA rules, treated the same as phone calls. So if you're doing that auto text, if you're doing the communication in text, that's something you got to be concerned with in the same way that you would on your phone. But here's the biggest thing. This is the biggest change. One-to-one written consent is required to contact anyone using regulated technologies or to contact someone on the do not call list. So, how many of you have over 100 people in command? How many of you have over 300 people in command? 500, 1,000, right? How many of you ran your database against a DNC list? Right? This is one of the challenges that we're in, is that,
Question on that.
yeah,
If they gave you their information, why would you need to run that against the do not call list?
yeah.
If they gave you their info, why is that something you have to check?
Yeah, so here's the rub, and this is the law that's coming in, and this is why we're talking about now. Just because the argument is just because someone gives you their information for a one-time thing or whatever, doesn't mean they consent to you communicating with them. I get it, and maybe it's like you did the pie thing. You're like, hey, I want a pie. I don't want you to call me every 3 months for the next years because I got a pie, right? And that's one of the things we're gonna talk about. Is there a strategy to make that happen? So one-to-one written consent is required to contact anyone using regulated technologies. Regulated technologies, by the way, are the auto dialer, or the voice blanket voicemails that you would leave, those kind of things, or if they are on the DNC, on the do not call registry, right? Heather, do we have a DNC registry that people can get in our office?
Yes, we do.
And how will they get that from you? Or how would they get that? Where would we find that?
They could email me and I could send them all the login information. Or, I don't know if we still have it in our drive. Our agent drive. We could add it to our agent drive.
Perfect. So what we want to do is we just want to look at that and make sure that we're looking at the DC. Most of your dialers, if you have run a Mojo, or what else are people using? Anything? Anyone using those anymore? No. That's good. You use Mojo? It will say, this is a challenge with things like Mojo. You get a list of like 1,000 names. And then you collect the button that says remove the DNC, and it goes to like 100 names. And you're like, wait a minute, I just want to call, I'll just skip it. I'm just gonna click that so I can click it right. If you do that, you violate the TCPA and could be up for those fines, yeah.
If you use a dialer and then you screen out DNCs and they miss one, who's it on?
Yeah, it's actually on you, it's your responsibility. I am sure your dialer, I'm sure the dialer has language in there that makes sure it's your responsibility. TCPA violation would say it's your responsibility. That's one of the dangers of using it. You have to run it. Another thing that would happen sometime in the market center as we were phone-based heavy, is we would get like a intercom message or an email message that went, hey, especially during bold, please add this person to your do not call list, just in your market center. If they get a call from a certain person, they say, please remove us. If you call them after they've communicated that, that can be a TCPA violation.
When I used to use the dialer a lot,
Yeah.
I kept the number for how to contact them about the DNC. And they'd be like, I'm on the do not call list. I can't believe you're calling me. I would apologize. Yeah, I can get you the information. I'm so sorry about that. And I actually set an appointment with someone because I was so nice about it.
That's great. That's,
So,
yeah, it's great to be, the right answer on that time is, I'm so sorry, right? Especially if someone says, hey, don't call me again, or pushes stop to your, text that you send, or, whatever, if they respond stop, you're allowed one more communication. That's it. Otherwise you violate TCPA. So you can say, I'm sorry, I've removed you from my list. And you sometimes see that auto-populated, right? When you hit stop, or when you write stop to certain things, I remove you from your list. What it's about is, I, consumer, don't want to hear from you. Stop calling me. Okay, I need to stop calling you. Yeah,
Isn't it just crazy how these phones are such a part of our life? The reason why we're sitting here and listening to you, because it's like an extension of your life, you know, not
Right.
just a real estate agent,
right.
but how did he get my number? Did he get my number on LinkedIn? Did he get it on Facebook? It's just
Right.
like, oh my God. What about the days when you could make 100 calls a day and not worry about, you know
Yeah.
what? You're making calls.
100%.
You got a tip throw through the tulips. It's crazy.
100%. I am there with you. I do think it changes how we got to do some business things. That's why we're doing this class. But yeah, I agree. So one-to-one communicate or consent is required to contact anyone using regulated technologies, or contact someone on the do not call list. Regulated technologies, I think I said this already. These include auto dialers, pre-recorded messages, artificial calls. I hate this. When some number calls my phone and then it hangs up, like after it rings one time, and then it'll like, or if I pick up and then it hangs up on me and then I get a call later. I hate that. Artificial calls, AI technologies, and voice phoning, right? So AI, wouldn't it be great if you could do a little AI, you record yourself on a message and you just send it to everyone? Hey, but you can't do that. Protects the consumer.
I think Maureen has a question on Zoom.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna ask, for regulated technology, does like a monthly email count? Like if I have my Sphere and my database in HomeBot, and they're not getting a phone call, they're getting an email talking about, their property value, things like that, but it's all automated unless I go in and reach out or they ask me. They can go in and request to have somebody reach out to them and give them a CMA. And they can unsubscribe at any time. And if ever anybody's ever unsubscribed, I just let it go. I don't try to like put them back into the system.
Right. So the unsubscribe button is one of the ways to protect yourself. But yes, communicating that way requires permission. I will just say this. If real estate did go through what we're going through on clear cooperation, by the way, it's not done yet. The Supreme Court just said we're not gonna be done with this. We're gonna let DOJ figure out some more things. So we'll see how it all plays out. But if that wasn't our conversation right now, TCPA would be our conversation. Like it's a thing that people are getting more and more aware of. So yes, it's like our neighborhood monthly updates, right? That we all send out. They're a marketing kind of piece. Yes, we should have permission before we send those to people. The unsubscribe button helps us as we transition to the new, right?
So do we need to be sending out something like from our office to that database, to the email, and say, do I have permission for this?
So I feel like this is a really great opportunity. I'm gonna just dive in on this
Yeah.
part. This is the whole reason you're in business, is to help people, right?
Right.
And be in relationship with people. Right now, everything we're talking about are people that you're not in relationship with, right? How do you actually get in relationship with them? Someone unsubscribes, give them a call and just say, hey, I'm just curious. This information you didn't want, right? I'm so sorry. Is there any information you would, right?
You get
It's
one
a whole
call.
different conversation.
Yeah.
The other thing is you have your whole sphere, right? All of us do not want to call our sphere, or most of us. That's where you're gonna get business from, and I can guarantee they are not calling anyone on you for sending them information, right? And if your sphere is small, go out and meet new people. That's why this is happening. I know everyone in this room hates the calls every single day. They're like, ugh, I got 85 spam messages. Do you guys answer them? No, you get mad, right? Like, just get in relationship with people. I think all of this is kind of freaking everybody out. But if you're having honest conversations and asking the right questions, and Maureen, if, you know, that's a great question. If you're like, hey, I'm sending this out, go to everyone that's on your newsletter right now, give them a call or send them a personal email and say, hey, we got some changes going on. Would you still like to receive this newsletter? If they don't say no, guess what? They're still on the newsletter. If they say no, that opens a door for opportunity to ask them why.
And more than what I love about Kami, she.
Oh, tell me more. Tell me more.
She's like, yeah, John, I was calling him all the time. How are you getting me out of this? How am I getting out? What I love about Kami is she saying, let's not let this get in our way, right? And that's 100% true. Let's not let
Make
this
it an
get-
opportunity. Don't let
Make it an opportunity.
Every problem
what it
has
should be.
multiple
Right, that's
opportunities.
100% true. As your broker, I'm gonna come and say, what's the right way that we're doing this? So, and we'll get to the spot, but rather than, hey, if you didn't tell me no, I'm gonna continue to send it to you. What we wanna do is figure out how do we get them to say, send this to me, right? How do we get them to do some consent stuff so it would be as simple as hey, come get this pie, right? Or do whatever we're doing on Facebook marketing. By responding to this, you agree to communication from, right? It's doing some of those disclaimer things. By responding to this, if you're working with a developer or someone that's doing open houses, whatever, on your open house sign-in sheet, by writing your name on this sheet and giving me this, you're agreeing that I can connect with you one-on-one, right? Those are the things that we're gonna wanna start to see. All right, next. So how do I comply? Well, one is check the DNC registry. We gotta check the DNC registry before calling or texting, ensure the number's not on the DNC registry. Just because you have a relationship doesn't mean you have permission to communicate with in a business way, right? So that's one of those things is even if they are in your database or in your sphere, doesn't mean you have permission to reach out to them, right? Avoid automated platforms. Don't use automated platforms for contacting leads. If you're using a dialer, stop using a 3-line dialer. Just do the 1 line. You hang up, you take the next call, you hang up. Doesn't mean you have to dial the number yourself. It means that you're actively in there on that line, right? Avoid pre-recorded messages. Refrain from using pre-recorded messages or artificial voices. Don't AI anything kind of cool and fun. And then don't buy leads. Purchase leads. This is a challenge. Purchase leads may not comply with TCPA laws. Verify the vendor's terms and service and whether they sell leads to multiple agents. One of the challenges is this. They want to reduce the amount of annoying calls or whatever that word was in the front. I forget what it was, but not obsessive.
Combative, excessive.
Combat, aggressive, excessive calls, right? So what happens if it's a lead and they're selling this lead to 5 different people? Now 5 different realtors or agents, I should say, because they're not really realtors, are calling that person. That's one of the things they're trying to combat. They're not allowed to do that. All right. So when do I have to have this 1-to-1 written consent? Well, the numbers you're calling or texting is on the federal or your brokerage DNC list. Here's the challenge also. Keller Williams, right? This is where it's a little different because we have so many individual businesses within Keller Williams. Keller Williams is your broker. However, just because someone allows Tam to connect with them, doesn't mean that I have permission to connect with them. This is outside of brokerage. This is businesses, right? Tam has a separate business than I have, right? Consent one-to-one is, I'm doing this with Tam, not with Kevin, right? So that's one of the things that we want to be aware of. So check if it's on there. We'll get you that information. We'll send a little follow-up email. We'll send a little follow-up email
For me.
with the DNC that's right on it. It'll come from Candy, but we'll work on it. Sound good? And then, you need, if you're gonna be, even if they're in your database, but you're gonna reach out to them automatically, whatever, however that goes, then you need to have one-to-one written, consent to communicate. So on your stuff, with your database or whatever, it might just make sense to do what Kami said. Hey, I'm reaching out to you personally. I know you've been getting stuff from me. Some of the laws are changing. I just want to, I'm gonna send you something that says you're still okay getting stuff from me. Does that make sense? Are you okay with that? Yeah, I love receiving your stuff. Oh, actually, your stuff is annoying. Well, now is my opportunity to have that conversation with them and, well, what would be helpful? You know, well, yeah, I get it every 2 weeks. I love your email, but I don't need these these neighborhood and market snapshots. I actually don't even live in Minnesota. You keep sending it to me for Minnetonka. Oh, really? Where are you living now? I'm living in Florida. Oh, I can send that to you for Florida as well. All those different things. Or if an artificial voice pre-recorded message is used. How long is consent for? Good for? Consent is good for 18 months if you're actively doing business with the individual through the transaction. Like I said, our agreements already asked for permission to communicate. If they didn't, as long as we're in active business with that person, we can communicate with them for the 18 months, okay? A non-business relationship, which is just hanging out with, written consent is good for 3 months if you're not conducting business with them.
Kevin, just because I don't buy real estate, it's when you say it's on our agreement, do you mean the buyer rep? Or what?
Like, yeah, the buyer rep, whenever we're getting
It's on
into
that.
them, it's one of our lines in there. With all the other legal language that says you will agree to us, you allow us to communicate.
Is that specifically for people on the do not call registry?
The one-to-one.
You're saying for everybody you ever talk to, you only have them for free. As I understood it, because I recently took real estate.
Yeah.
That was for the people on the do not call registry.
Right. So these are people you're calling or texting on the federal or brokerage DNC list. That's the one-to-one communication. The challenge is, we just talked about, we haven't run our databases against the DNC, right? So there are so many people on the DNC. There's a reason it goes from 1,000 to 100. So we want to do is make sure that we have consent for everyone. Go ahead.
So on the buyer rep form, it says that it's consent for communication during the term of this contract and at any time thereafter. So is this something that will change then in August?
I don't know if that will, like next August, I don't know if that'll change or not. There's a whole language committee that talks about
Right.
that. It may change, it may,
That seems like it puts a.
that goes
Versus
on
anytime.
beyond this, right?
Anytime thereafter.
Right. So legal might say, hey, our contract actually isn't in compliance with the new rules.
Right. Okay.
Definition of conducting business.
So you're actively doing business with that individual, you're in the transaction. Right? You're showing them a property, they're your buyer, you have them under rep, which we already have that agreed on there. If someone's actively your client, they've already consented to communicate with them. Go ahead.
So you mentioned a little while ago, the triple line versus single line dialer. Line dialer considered an auto dialer, or is it on the triple line?
Well, the challenge is just because you do, yes, it's still an auto dialer, right? You can't, the name of it is auto dialer. So, the difference is, who there's another person on that line. The challenge is if I'm calling 10 numbers at once and I'm just talking to the one that picks up, that's a big problem. 3 numbers at once, and that just picks up. Here we go. Existing database. So what do I need to do with my existing database? You can call your existing database if they're not on the DNC and you do not use regulated technologies. So you can call them like this. You can text them like this. You don't remember regulated technology is that auto stuff, right? So if you're autoing things, you got to get some permission. I'm going to show you one at the end from KW that Candy got that they're just in the process now. We need to get communication process. We're all on their team. They still want to make sure we get all of their communication, or we're on their team. They're on our team. DNC registry, and you do not use regulated technologies. Manual calls. You're going to make a phone call. You are manually picking up the phone and dialing the number. You only need to check the DNC list. So if you're manually doing it, just check the DNC and you can communicate. Good? Right.
Around with like having the numbers, where to go, and
Pulling them in.
really dialing them, but they use the auto dialer.
Yeah, so the nice thing is if you're using them from Mojo, which by the way, if you read the things, like if someone says, how did you get my number? You're not allowed to say, I got it from Mojo. It says right on there, you're not supposed to say where it's coming from. But the problem, if you use Mojo and you take all the DNC stuff off, that's really the challenge. Now I can consent to them one-to-one, right? If you're not manually picking up the phone and dialing the number, but that's what's happening, right? You're making that phone. You need to check DNC list. For sale by owners, this is another one. How many of you are reaching out to for sale by owners? All right, we have some opportunities for maybe some business there. If you don't have a specific interested buyer for that home, check through the federal and brokerage DNC list. If you have a client and you know, hey, this is a for sale by owner, they're marketing a property, they want people to call them, you can call them and say, hey, I have a buyer for your property. What they're protecting here on the for sale by owner, if they're on the do not call list, is the marketing too. Hey, I would love to sell your home for you, which is different than I have a buyer to bring to your property.
So one angle I use is, say I like to preview
Yeah.
all available properties that are
Right.
on the market. Can
Yeah.
I come check out your home and in the process of doing that?
Now you're gonna do your marketing to them, that spot.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, cause I know it totally, I would just say, my defense on for sale, see, now I'm sounding like Keamy instead of broker. My defense on that is their marketing. They want to sell their house. They want to talk to someone that could help them sell their house. If you walk in with the intention of, I want to see your property, I may have the right person for it. I'm not here just to get you to list with me, then let's go ahead then.
My best year with for sale by owners, I had 14. And my first phone call with them was, I do not have a buyer. I want to be somebody who knows everything that's out on the market. I'm not going to come and see your house unless I have a buyer or you ask me to. But I am going to keep calling if that's okay. Make sure that it's available. Is it okay for me to call you back? And then I would keep calling them and I would keep calling them. And I don't know that I ever set an appointment on my first call. Mine was usually on my 4th, 5th, and 6th calls.
Yeah.
But it was because I asked.
Right.
I told them I didn't have a buyer.
Right.
They were like, oh, you're gonna tell me you have a buyer and you want.
You're honest with them
Yeah,
and you seek their permission.
to the point where Christy's like, you're bad for my business model because you sell so many of them.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. How about an expired listing for your brokerage? There's an 18th month established business exception from the do not call. However, the former customer can revoke consent, which applies to everyone in the brokerage. Yeah, this is talking about if it's our brokerage. Again, this this is actually one of the challenging spots for real estate because, an expired listing is a heavily targeted client, or no longer client, but, consumer out in the world. And so they get calls from lots of people. And this is one of the things that it says if there are brokerage, of course you can. We have a, hey, your home's came off the market. It's my client, I'm gonna call them. I don't want all of you to ever call me if they were expired, but you can, right? That's a.
So is that specifically saying then if we get an expired list and they're not with our brokerage, then that 18-month exception?
So then you would, yeah, you would want to see, are they on the do not call list, right? Yeah, can I call them? If they're on the do not call list, I really can't call. Even though, yeah, even though I'm gonna violate it, now I'm gonna violate it, now I'm gonna get a fee, right? This is one of the challenges, is the lawsuits are up 40%. Gary paid a big penalty up on the TCPA stuff. But we haven't seen it locally. Like, I haven't heard Pat just got fined $1,500. If I come and say Pat just got fined $1,500, then we feel it a little bit more, right? And we go, oh, this is a real thing. It's a real thing. It just hasn't hit us locally in our spot yet. Expired listing at another brokerage, just answer that question. Check the DNC. Knowing someone personally, by the way, this is important. Knowing someone personally does not consent to contact. It does not constitute consent to contact. Because you know someone doesn't mean you're allowed to reach out to them. Also, this is businesses versus consumer to consumer, right? So if I'm a friend, I'm not gonna check and see if Lydia is on the DNC before I call her. Because I'm not calling her as a business, I'm calling her as person to person, right? Versus business to whatever. This is protecting people from business calls. Caller ID, oh, this is another issue. Yeah, that's a separate violation if the phone you are using to solicit a consumer has a caller ID blocked. So don't block your caller IDs. Ensure your name or business name is visible for any call or text you're making to solicit business. Good? Ready for conclusion? Be smart, be conservative, and always check the registries. Get the necessary consent before making any contact. Hey, I'm gonna reach out to you, especially if you're doing it automatically. Anyone that you're putting, it's probably not a good idea just to take a list from one of your dialers, bring it into command, set everyone up on a smart plan and just send them all stuff. That's probably not great. Nice thing is if you do it correctly, it has an unsubscribe on there. It's never a great idea to remove unsubscribe. I've done all these things. So I'm just telling you, it's probably not, it's not something you should do. Staying compliant with TCPA rules does not only protect you from legal repercussion, it also builds, like Beth was saying, trust and credibility with your potential clients. Be honest, don't try to trick, don't harass, all those things. So this is some of the things we might start to see. And we might even start to see maybe from a Keller's spot of how we handle this in our communications. But this, tell us about this, Candy. Where did you see this?
I was joining MAP's coaching call. And this, as part of joining that call, you know, you have to put in your email, your name, and then also these two questions were in there. I was like, this is interesting. I've never seen this before.
Right. So what's going to happen is now that you've joined that, MAPS will say, hey, we're not only a coaching company, we're marketing to build our business, right? We don't want Candy just at one thing. We want her at multiple things. So now we're giving her the option to get this stuff from me. How are we going to communicate with you? How are we going to communicate with you? On your marketing stuff, if you're doing contests, if you're doing whatever ways you're doing to gather information, gather names, make your sphere bigger, it's going to be wise to have something on this that says, I consent to communication from you, right there. And see, this is what they did. Even if your name is on the federal, state, or individual do not call list, may send marketing texts, calls and texts. And then the next part, they address the next part, which is KW may use an automated system for selection or dialing numbers pre-recorded. What they're saying is, hey, you're giving us consent to communicate with you, even if you're on the do not call list, and you're allowing us to do it with the regulated technology. Good? Fun? Mason?
Back to the existing database,
Yeah.
do you know if command has a function that can compare your command database with NC?
With DNC, I do not. I haven't heard about it.
I'll email tech support.
Yeah, that would be,
I'll email tech support and figure that out.
Thank you.
Because that would be,
that'd be an awesome tool.
that would be awesome, and there kind of should be.
Yeah.
Or do you have to export your contact?
I had to do that one at a time.
Oh, it'd be
Well,
painful,
you-
I'd
right?
be here for a week.
I think what Candy just said is you could export your contact list and then run it through the
DNC list.
Through a CSV.
Maybe.
That would-
I'll reach out to tech support.
You know what?
That, would you guys think that'd be helpful? KW said, hey, we're gonna tell you if you're.
Other people have got to be asking this.
If this is on DNC, it just says you enter the name, you enter their phone number, it shows right there, DNC. That would be awesome.
You put the
That'd
phone
be
number
great.
in and it says that the number.
Yeah, put them on a smart plan, says DNC. That'd be amazing. Nice. Call it the Rick plan. Awesome. Good, that's all I have for you today. Thanks for coming. If you haven't, oh, go ahead.
Nothing.
All right, no, I like these last minute things. Go.
No, I again was about current smart plans that are in place.
Right.
What's your first step?
Well, let's get the DNC, let's hear from KW and see what they say. They might have it on the bottom of our, the unsubscribe thing already, which goes out in our smart plans. If you look at your neighborhoods, there's always a spot to unsubscribe. It'd be good to hear how they're addressing it.
And I love Beth. Be nice, apologetic, honest.
It was
and most of
amazing
the
when you would
people are
call someone
going-
who said, "Mom, do not call us, you should." Oh my gosh, I am so sorry.
Yeah,
I did,
generally think
I
they're gonna
did
be-
try and match my list against that, but you must be on there. I absolutely have the number somewhere. If you could like stay on with me, give me 1 second. I apologize so much. And it was like, I'm really just calling because I'm having an open house around the area and like would just start talking and
Right.
like, okay, here, I have the number. And then by the end of it, they're like, wow, you're so much nicer than everybody else who calls. Thanks so much. And I was like, well, if you ever need somebody, give me a call. I'm just nice to everybody. Not really, but I told them I was nice. And then, yeah.
I have a question. So you go through your database and get sent from your client. Does that expire then 3 months later and you have to do it again?
I'm not exactly sure how that's gonna work. I'm
You're not actively doing business?
yeah, I don't think that's right. I don't think that's like, how often do you have to give consent? It might be right. Maybe we needed more like we just keep it on. I'm not sure how that would work, but yeah, the 18-month and the 3-month things,
You
right?
pay 3
Yeah.
months for your entire
Yeah.
database.
Yeah, we have to figure that out.
Because if you're asking them to send a business related thing and they consent to it, isn't that them
Well, that is a
consenting
business
to a
relationship,
business
yeah.
relationship
We're
then?
transparent.
So if you say, can I send you my work email?
Now I can do it for the next year and a half.
That's a year and a half. That's what I would argue.
Right, because you're doing business now, you're international.
You didn't say, can I just look at you at all? Or can I send you my newsletter?
Would LinkedIn connections be considered a business relationship?
I don't think so, but if you're putting your information on LinkedIn, I think you can reach out to people on LinkedIn. That's what it's all about. It's like going on Facebook and not allowing anyone to communicate by Facebook.
Would you be able to call them?
I don't know. That's a good question.
Try and see if you can find.
Here's my thing. By the way, no matter what you do, someone might say to you, hey, I'm on the do not call list. The problem is not that. The problem isn't, hey, I'm on the do not call list. You called me one time. The problem is I ignore you telling me you don't want the calls. And sometimes I don't purposely ignore, because I just sent you my automated stuff. I haven't heard, I don't even see that you're saying, stop, do not call, do whatever. Sometimes I'll send out my texts, and because I made them for everyone, someone will just write stop on it, and I'm like, my response then is, I'm sorry, this wasn't a automated thing. I wrote it for you. Have a fantastic week, right? Now, if I do that the same thing next week, now I'm gonna get in trouble, right? Because it's the obsessive, no, what is it?
Combat excessive.
Combat excessive.
To combat excessive, unsolicited communication. Good. All right,
Don't forget $500 gift card at the end of every quarter, so put your name in here, put training.
Just on the top or the bottom, you have to do both tickets.
Yeah, if you don't do both tickets, just write your name on the top or the bottom.
And, the Dream Team supplied Taco Bell, right?
Oh, yes, from Stream Lending, so get your taco.